Welcome to NeverTheLess podcast with Bidemi Mark-Mordi, a show dedicated to organic leaders and leaderpreneurs. Today, you would learn how to discover your essence and live more powerfully.
Welcome back on the NeverTheLess show, a show for organic leaders and leaderpreneurs. This month, we're looking at the subject matter of tensions, and last week, we talked about what tension is and how critical it is to find your stability point. Mr. Victor is still here with us. So what are we talking about this week?
Really, if you ask me, we've had a lot already to go and deal with, but there must be more when it comes to Pastor B. There's always more. So today, we'll be talking about tension and transitions. And trust me, it's a whole lot. Pastor B, I know. What should we expect?
Hi, Victor. Hello, Ijoma. Welcome back to the show. And thank you for joining us if you're on the show. Yes, indeed, we're looking at the subject matter of tensions and transitions in this episode. Now, before we get into today's subject matter, I want to highlight again, if you're listening or you're watching this by way of video on YouTube or anywhere else you might have stumbled on this, I'm sure you understand why tension is a conversation that we need to have in this season. Everywhere in the world, things are getting harder and harder, it seems, and you're wondering if life was always like this or whether this is peculiar in our day. The truth of the matter is every generation has had their pressure and their tension.
True.
So it's only when you are in it that it seems like it's the end of the world. So number one word encouragement I hope that I'm bringing today is that tension is not the end of the world and it is not peculiar to you. Not at all. It is not peculiar to you. It's something others have dealt with before, and after you, others will still deal with it. So do not lose your mind because you are in the press, because this will not last forever. That's number one. Number two is that whether you can see it or not, maybe I should address it and point you to it. Have you guys noticed that the greater the tension, the more ingenious man is becoming? So it just tells me, again, and reaffirms what I'm trying to say here, that man's ingenuity is sometimes capped by man's comfort. Let me say that one more time. I'm hoping that this is a tweetable moment for someone or something you can put on a plaque somewhere. Man's ingenuity is usually capped by man's what? Comfort. When man chooses comfort, his ingenuity loses its place. So if you want to see man, the genius of man, tension must be applied. So again, is tension bad then? I don't think that tension is bad. The problem we have had, which we talked about in the first episode, is that we do not steward tension properly. Not that tension is bad. So today we are saying that every transition point will lead you to tension. Whether you are transitioning from becoming a primary school student to becoming a secondary school student, you will go through tension. If you now decide to go from becoming a primary school student to a boarding school, secondary school student, your tension is higher. If you choose tomorrow, you finish secondary school, you're going to university, your tension will grow. Then you finish and when we're in school, we're like, oh my God, the day I will just not need to read again. And then you go to work, your tension is worse. Where your lecturer used to talk to 200 of you or 50 of you at the same time. And some of you can walk away and not pay attention. Your boss is talking to 5 of you. So tension grows. With every level of transition, tension grows. Last week, I told us that tension is the gap between two explicable and understandable seasons of our lives. So the young man who has decided or has come to the point where he knows that the next natural progression of his life is marriage would be under tension. Tension will begin from, have I found the right girl? So, what do I need to do? All of those ideologies come into one room now. How are we going to deal with them? So tension always, always, always has rides on the back of a transition. I think that's what I'm trying to say.
Makes sense.
Wherever a man needs to change for the better, wherever there is growth in the offing, wherever something needs to shift, whatever kind of transition is in front of us would always breed tension.
Always breed tension.
Always breed tension. For something as simple as you've been sheltered all your life and now you have to make your own decisions and make your friends.
Yeah.
Tension.
Yeah.
And when you find yourself in transition point, a lot of us think that because it's a transition point that we can, I don't know, this is the season of affirmations, right? So some of us want to affirm our way through transitions. I wish it works like that. Then none of us will have issues now. We'll just write out the affirmation. Everybody will sit down on our bed and we'll fold our legs and we'll begin to decree the things. Yes? But when you finish affirmations in transition, you have to get up and walk. I want to explain this by maybe sharing something that I think it was when I was about to have my first child. We started these antenatal classes. We had to learn the whole gamut of what it means to be pregnant, what part of the baby is forming at what point in life. And then towards the end of the pregnancy, we were taking classes on birth classes. What should we do? You know, when the midwife says to you, breathe, what should you do? When they say to you, don't push, what do you do? And, you know, at some point in that room, I think some of us were not paying attention. I'll never forget. Then one lady who was seated beside me said, ladies, you want to pay attention to this. We were looking at her because she was pregnant, like we were in the same class. What's she talking about? And that was when she started to tell us the story of her first child. And she said, for starters, she did attend the classes, but she was not paying attention. And she just had it somewhere in her head, I will do what works for me. She gets into the delivery room. I'll never forget what this woman said. And she said, when the pain was the hardest, all she wanted to do was just push the baby out. So in her mind, she had gotten to the end. Her threshold for pain was done. So she started to try to push this baby out. And the midwife started to scream and say, don't push, breathe. Don't push, breathe. She said she didn't listen. She pushed and the baby came out. She said for over 4 hours, they were stitching her up because of the jagged tear she had. Because I know this is graphic, but I want you to get it because at that point, a baby was meant to come forth. It's life that she's bringing forth. But because she wasn't managing her tension properly, because really all that pain when you're about to have a baby is contractions. It's your muscles contracting, nothing more. But because she allowed the contractions to have a better part of her, what happened?
Yeah, something bad.
She said she had 63 stitches.
Wow.
And she said that was the beginning. That was not even it was the pain after. Do you understand that? When she gave us that story, all of us did like this. Because that's why you didn't need anybody to tell you that. You should pay attention and take notes going forward. Do you understand that? So tensions come at transition points. If you know what it is that is about to come forth, and you know the value of what is about to come forth, what should you do? You do your best to ensure that you make a conducive environment for what you're about to bring forth.
True.
So whether the tension comes because, okay, you're about to write promotional exams, or the tension is because you just got promoted or you just got a new job, the job you had prayed for all your life, and you get there and the culture is different. Whether the culture is that you had always wanted to get married, now you are married and it's not looking like what you read in Mills and Bones, or you're telling novellas, whatever it is. We go back to what I've always said. Find your stabilizing point. For me, stabilizing point is Jesus. I said so. But you can choose what is the lowest that we go.
Yeah.
You need to tell yourself, this is the lowest I will go. After here, I'm not going lower. From this moment on, I begin to climb again. But you must determine what it is. If you're able to determine that, you will find that you are able to go through transitions, no matter the tension, without having to lose your mind. Do you understand that? And the reason is simple. Transitions bring change. And change causes tension. Think about it now. There is nothing you have ever done in your life that is going to result in the change you have wanted that doesn't give you tension. Is it moving from one nation to another nation? It's what you have dreamt about. Then when that day comes, you will find yourself recognizing, I don't even know what I'm going to meet when I get there. I'm not sure if I'll get a job on time. I'm not sure this. I'm not sure that. I'm not sure that. So every transition leads to change. And that's why tension is part of the accompaniment of the transition.
It's amazing because there's no how we would understand tension and transitions properly if, we don't get to this point.
Yes.
Is that something you want to say?
Oh, yes, I do. A lot of times when we hear about transitions, we think of the big things.
Yes.
And of course, with you there, you always have an interesting way of defining things that gives it a whole picture. What would your definition of transitions be?
It's the doorway to change. Every time a man goes through a transition, something changes. Something changes. See, and a few of my friends were having a conversation this morning. I was having a conversation about her elderly parents and the change that has come in the life of that parent and how that is being managed. So there was a key point that we were looking at, and I said, okay, these are ways for us to deal with that thing. And then one of us says, even for our generation, we need to do this and do that. And I said to them, well, in our minds, we feel like we're still young. So because we feel we're still young, let's assume that it's this other generation that needs to do this. But as we had that conversation, one of the things that was clear to the three of us when we were talking is that expression, the child becomes the father of the man, is not something somebody just thought about. It is the reality of life. Do you understand it? So even the one who is towards the end of his life, and those of us who are watching to care for the one who is, it looks like he's rapidly advancing towards the end of his life. You know that death is not the end of life, right? But just knowing that transition is coming and the details of how that transition is progressing is causing a lot of tension in relationships, in finances, in the old man's health. All of those things are just being affected at the same time. So unless you come back and you say to yourself, look, aging is part of success.
True.
Because every one of us prays to age.
True.
So an aging does not happen the same way for everybody. You find rest. That's rest number one. Rest number two, those of us that now become the caregivers need to recognize and are looking at it and say, okay, what's happening with Papa or Mama is the fact that they're diminishing in capacity. So it's now our responsibility. But they don't recognize that they're diminishing in capacity. So they're going to be fighting. That will throw up another tension. So on this divide, I have to learn to be patient and just let them go through. Can you see it? So it's just back and forth like that. And every change is accompanied by its peculiar tension. Do you understand that? Okay.
Very well, ma'am.
So
I'm going to ask this question, but when we come back from the break, we'll start from there.
Okay.
So the question is, how do people recognize circles? Because I believe circles is one of the things that make it difficult for people to even transition.
Yes.
So how do people recognize that this is a circle I'm in? That is happening.
A cycle.
A cycle that is happening. And So to now recognize what to do, the steps that they need to take
Yes.
to be able to step into their next.
Okay.
I know there's a lot you say, but when we get back,
Okay.
we'll take it.
When we come back, we'll continue the conversations. And this conversation is about tensions and transitions. What do they have in common? And the word is change. God bless you.
In a world filled with many fears and discouragement, life often becomes a burden. For those who know the way, life is just simple. Do not worry, you're not alone on this life's journey, as Bidemi Mark-Mordi shares powerful insights and principles from her everyday work and life experiences in her book, NeverTheLess. NeverTheLess is a book designed to encourage and equip you to face life with courage, hope, and determination. Get a copy of NeverTheLess and other books written by Bidemi Mark-Mordi, like The Wisdom of the Seed, Honor, The Theology of Work, and so much more from a bookstore nearby, or call 080-905-63555, or send an email to bidemi@bidemimarkmordi.com to place your order. I guarantee you will make it. Nevertheless.
Welcome back. It's still the Nevertheless show, a show for organic leaders and leaderpreneurs. We're still here today talking about tensions and transitions. And before we went on a break, Mr. Victor asked a question. Let's dive in.
So, possibly I was saying, but it's looking to me like, it's a compound, a compound question. But really, I think it's okay to know how to better manage, tension, so as to steward tension properly. How do we steward tension properly?
Okay, well, your question initially had to do with cycles, and understanding cycles is one step to stewarding tension and transitions properly. But before we get into that, again, let me do a short recap by way of definition. That tension is the gap between two explicable and understandable seasons. What that means is that there's nothing ambiguous about where you are and where you are going. If you're single, you know that where you want to transition to is marriage. If you're married and not a parent yet, you know where you want to, your logical next place that you want to transition to that's causing you tension is parenthood. Do you understand it? If you're a student and you just finished school, your logical next step is I want to get a job. I want to be able to become a contributor to society. All of these are cycles. Do you see it?
Yes.
All of these are cycles. But the point I'm making is tension can be difficult to steward if you don't know what your nest is. Do you see it? So when you know what the nest is, if a child comes and the child is crying and crying and crying and crying, and I ask the child, what's the problem? And the child doesn't say and continues to cry. Depending on the age of the child, I'll be able to guess because I've been a parent many times over. So if the child is between 1 and 2, we know that they cry when they are wet. We know that they cry when they are hungry. We know that they cry when they are sleepy. And we know that they cry when they hurt. So I have 4 things to check before I arrive at what the solution might be. Do you understand it? So even when the child is not able to speak, I can ascertain by experience what the child needs by doing what? Eliminating some of the things on that list. But when, for instance, you enter into a room and your 12-year-old is crying and crying, and you're asking what, and that child is not speaking, you become worried. Because you know something has shifted, but you cannot steward it until you have understood it. Do you see it? Now let's come back to adulthood. Because with children, we can still find a way around it. But imagine that you are the one who is under pressure and tension, and you have no idea why. So if, for instance, you say, I have financial tension, the question I would ask you is, what changed regarding your finances? You may say, oh, I used to pay school fees for 1 child. Now I have to pay for 2 children, and yet my pay has not increased. We now know where the source of your tension is. That's why I said that tension is best steward when you know that it is a gap between 2 not just 2 seasons, but 2 explicable and understandable seasons. In marriage, if you have marriage tension in your marriage, say over your communication, let me tell you, every time, if it's a marital tension and it has to do with communication, every time the tension is between and kindness. Because you don't want to be in that relationship and not tell the truth. But you also want to, the moment you can resolve how to tell the truth and be kind at the same time, you resolve the tension. But 80% of the time, because we're emotionally invested, we all mostly tell truth without kindness. So you must know where you are and where you are headed. If the moment you can, you may not be able to define the in-between, but if you know where you are and where you are headed, it will give you an idea how to deal with your tension. So you must pay attention to these 5 things that I want to say to you when it comes to stewarding your tension. Number 1, pay attention to the primary part of your life that is being highlighted in the season of tension. So, because of the work that I do, you come and somebody's crying, I just don't know. Oh, my life is going down the drain. That doesn't make sense. There's never a time that all your life is bad at the same time.
It has to be defined.
So we have to define. So definitions are critical. What part of your life is being highlighted that's causing this pain? What is causing the tension? So by the time you press, and that's the hardest part of my job.
You find it.
Sometimes you will do 4 sessions before the person will finally say, it is my mother-in-law. Before the person will finally say, we don't have enough money. Next time, you guys just go to the point, yes? But the point I'm making is you must pay attention to what part of your life is being focused, highlighted. Because you can't tell me that your marriage is all bad simply because your money is all bad in the moment.
True.
If we keep the conversations, narrow it down to, it's when we talk about money that we have a blowout. Your problem is half solved.
True.
The tension is half resolved.
True.
So number 1, pay attention to the primary part of your life that is being highlighted in your tension season. If you know what it is, you'll be able to deal with it. Do you understand that?
Well.
Acknowledge your limitations. Acknowledge your limitations. Let's go back to marriage and money. I want my husband to give me 10 million naira every month going forward. Because money is what is causing our quarrel. Yes? Or causing our tension. Here's the point. Does he earn 10 million? Yes, he earns 10 million. How much does he earn? He earns 15 million. 15. Okay. He earns 15 million. Okay, so what do you people usually do with money? Oh, he will pay his tithe, for instance. So if he earns 15 million and he takes, what's his tithe? 1.5 million. You are down to 13.5. I know my math when it comes to money. So 13.5 million, and you want 10 out of it. Within that 10 million that you are asking, what will you do? Are you going to fuel the cars? Are you going to pay rent if rent is to be paid? Will you pay school fees?
The school fees we pay.
Can you see it? Acknowledge your limitations. It does not make any kind of sense to have tension around my demanding 10 million of someone who earns 15 million. It's already unreasonable. My demand is already unreasonable. So that tension need not to be in our marriage. It's something I need to resolve by myself, because even though I say it's unreasonable, and which means that I can step away from it, but why am I under pressure to get 10 million? That's a personal tension that I need to deal with. Can you see it so far? So you must acknowledge your limitations. Recently, the thing that's been causing me tension is menopause. Initially, it was something I wanted to fight. Then eventually, one day I woke up and I said, the more I fight this thing, the more it's flooring me. So I just reached this one decision. I'm not fighting anymore. That took away 70% of my tension. I am not fighting anymore. 70% of my tension. Because I now know that in this season of my life, my body has limits. And as long as I do not push my body beyond that limitation, I'll be fine. Do you see it? So acknowledge your limits. Number 3, recognize the end of cycles. Part of what I had to recognize in this season is like, no matter what I do, even the doctors had told me before that there are certain hormones that my body cannot produce at this point of my life. So it's the end of a cycle. Who is supposed to be adjusting? It's not the hormones, it's me. So I have to now forge a new stability that understands that that particular hormone does not exist in my body. So I can decide that, okay, I'll do what they call HRT, hormonal replacement therapies. Or I can say, okay, I will replace with food. But whatever I'm doing, that hormone is not coming back by itself. Initially, it used to be there and I didn't even know it existed. Now that it's no longer there, I know it doesn't exist anymore. So I'm paying attention. I have to acknowledge that this cycle has ended and I'm starting another one. And because I'm starting another cycle, the way I did in the last cycle may not work in this new one.
Absolutely.
Whether it's with your children, because if you have a child who is now an adult over 25 and you're still treating that child as 15, tension will not end in your house. Number 4, open up to the learning for the new season. A lot of us do not learn for the future. We are always overly invested in what is happening now. That we do not recognize that there's something ahead. And that's why we're caught off guard. By the time that nest begins to show up in the neighborhood, what do you find? It is now harder for you to adjust. So you need to open up to learn for the next season. You are not at that season yet, but you need to begin to work out. So say, okay, where do I need to go? What do I need to do? What might I have? What will I do in this season that will help the next season? Open up to learn for the next season. And number 5, feed at the level of where you are headed. So if you're 20 or you're 25 and you're about to get ready to get married, do not be thinking of just me and my husband. Because what will shock you is that it's not you and your husband. There will be your in-laws. There will be your everybody.
True.
So you cannot now say, oh, and now I'm just going to buy. I used to have one plate that I used to serve food. I'll just buy one more.
So it's 2.
You can't buy 2. You have to buy 4. Because you have to make allowances for the excesses that are going to come. So that's why I say feed at the level of your nest. A lot of us feed at the level of our present. So when I say feed at the level of your nest, it involves learning. It involves who your mentors will be in that nest. If you're going to be married, it's time, now that you are at the tail end of your single, is when you begin to source the mentees, the mentors for that, for when you are married. It's not when there's fire on your mountain after you're married. Now you now begin to knock on different doors. That's why a lot of us take mentors out, mentoring from Facebook and Instagram of people who they themselves don't know what they're doing. So I've told you 5 things. Number 1, pay attention to the primary area of your life that is being highlighted. Number 2, acknowledge your limitations. Number 3, recognize the end of the cycles that you are in. Number 4, be open to learning. Number 5, feed at the level of your nest. When you do these things over and over and over, it diffuses tension because you can have conversations that's over money and you are not unkind. And all of those things is how we move forward.
Wow. It's been an amazing time just listening to these 5 points that Pastor B has highlighted. So, Pastor B, if you are going to capture, don't mind me, but if you are going to capture these 5 things in a few sentences, even as we close this, what would it be?
You said I shouldn't mind you, so I'm not going to mind you.
Mind me.
So in closing, here's what we have talked about. We said that every tension is because there is a transition in the offing. And we said that it's tension, or it manifests that tension because there is change that happens with every transition. Yes? So we have said that what to do is to always be sure that you can explain, define, and you understand where you are. And then at least define where you are supposed to be headed. Because if you have those 2 things, they're a pillar here, they're a pillar here, and they will give you a bit of stability. Then come into the room and take learning for yourself. Admit when you don't have the capacity. Ask for, learning or help when you need it. Know that your cycles must change as life continues. And embrace them. You can't be resisting a cycle that you can't change. Do you see it? So once you do that, what you'll find is that if you handle your transitions well, your tensions will be properly stewarded. Does that make sense?
It does.
We've come to the end of this episode. It's our 2nd week having the conversations about tensions. And this week we looked at tensions and transitions. Please keep the faith with us. Next week we'll come with another episode. Please remember that all the power to do what you need to do, as long as you have found yourself at the right stability point, is within you. If you embrace your superpower, you live a powerful life. Till next week when I'll see you, Victor.
Thank you, ma.
And Ijoma.
It's been an honor, ma. Thank you.
God bless you. We'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to NeverTheLess. For more information and resources, call 080-90563-555 or send an email to bidemi@bidemimark-mordi.com. Don't forget, discovering your purpose helps you live more powerfully.